Finding your true self is not a peaceful journey. It is not gentle. It is not safe. And it is not socially rewarded. In fact, according to Carl Jung, it is one of the most dangerous things a human being can attempt, not because it destroys you, but because it destroys who you thought you were. Most people spend their lives building a personality that helps them survive, not one that tells the truth. You learn early what is acceptable, what gets love, what avoids punishment, what keeps you included. And slowly, without noticing, you adapt. You don't choose this. It happens. You smile when you're angry. You agree when you feel resistance. You silence instincts that feel inconvenient. And over time, you mistake adaptation for identity. Jung called this the persona, the mask, necessary, but deadly when mistaken for the self. Because the persona is built for the world, not for the soul. And the soul does not stay quiet forever. It waits. It watches. And then, usually through crisis, it interrupts. This is why people who seem successful suddenly collapse. Why people with stable lives wake up empty. Why achievement loses meaning. Why anxiety appears without a clear cause. This is not weakness. This is the psyche rebelling against a life that isn't yours. Jung believed the true self cannot be lived without conflict, because becoming real means becoming distinct, and distinct people disrupt systems built on conformity. When you begin to search for your true self, you don't become calmer first. You become unstable. Old values stop working. Old motivations fade. Old relationships feel tight. You start noticing how much of your life was built on approval, on fear, on avoidance. This is dangerous because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And what you see demands action. The true self does not negotiate with comfort. It does not ask permission from society. It demands alignment. And alignment has consequences. You may disappoint people who benefited from your silence. You may outgrow roles that once defined you. You may lose admiration for gaining integrity. This is why Jung warned that individuation is not for the faint-hearted. It requires separating from the collective psyche, from borrowed beliefs, from inherited expectations, from unconscious loyalties. This separation feels like danger because, psychologically, it is. Belonging kept you safe. Truth makes you alone, at least for a while. The true self does not emerge gently. It confronts you with everything you avoided. Your aggression, your selfishness, your ambition, your resentment. Not to shame you, but to integrate you. Because a self that excludes half its nature is not a self. It is a performance. And performances are exhausting. Jung believed neurosis begins when the persona dominates the psyche, when the mask silences the soul. And the cure is not positivity. It is honesty, brutal honesty, the kind that costs you illusions. You don't find your true self by adding traits. You find it by removing lies, by withdrawing projections, by admitting what you are capable of, by accepting what you desire, by facing what frightens you about yourself. This is why the journey is dangerous, because it strips you of moral comfort. You can no longer say, I'm just this way, or I had no choice, or that's who I've always been. The true self demands responsibility, and responsibility is heavier than repression, but it is also the only thing that gives life weight. Meaning does not come from fitting in. It comes from becoming coherent, from living in alignment with your inner law. Jung believed that when you betray this law, the psyche punishes you, not morally, psychologically, through emptiness, through anxiety, through loss of vitality. These are signals, not defects, signals that you are living someone else's life. Finding your true self will cost you certainty. It will cost you approval. It may cost you the life you built, but what it gives you cannot be taken. A sense of reality, a feeling that your life belongs to you, that you are no longer acting from fear or imitation, that you are standing in your own existence. This is why most people avoid this path, not because it is wrong, but because it is irreversible. Once you begin to live truthfully, returning to self-betrayal feels unbearable, and the psyche knows this. That is why it resists. But if you feel drawn here, if something in you is listening closely, then the danger has already begun, and the question is no longer if you will face it, but whether you will do so consciously. Most people do not choose to search for their true self. They are pushed by collapse, by loss, by exhaustion, by a quiet dread they can no longer ignore. According to Carl Jung, the psyche is not passive. When ignored, it intervenes, and it intervenes through crisis. This is why transformation rarely begins in comfort. Comfort maintains illusions. Crisis shatters them. When you live too long out of alignment, the unconscious compensates. It does not ask politely. It creates symptoms: anxiety without cause, depression without reason, sudden rage, loss of meaning, burnout. These are not disorders first. They are messages, signals that the life you are living no longer fits the person you are becoming. Jung believed that when the ego refuses growth, the psyche forces it. This is dangerous because the ego hates disruption. The ego wants continuity, identity, stability, control. But the true self does not prioritize stability. It prioritizes wholeness. And wholeness requires breaking what is too small. This is why people often say, "I don't recognize myself anymore." They are right. The old self is dissolving, and dissolution feels like death. Psychologically, it is. You are losing a familiar identity, one that protected you, one that made sense of the world. Even if it was false, it was known. The unknown is terrifying, so the ego resists. It clings harder to roles, to routines, to labels, to explanations. It tries to medicate the discomfort away, to rationalize it, to blame others. Anything but listen. But the psyche escalates. If whispers are ignored, it shouts. If shouting is ignored, it collapses structures. This is why Jung warned that refusing individuation does not keep you safe. It makes you brittle, and brittle structures shatter violently. The danger of finding your true self is not just internal, it is social. As the old identity breaks, your relationships strain because many connections are built on unconscious contracts. I will be this, so you can be that. When you change, the contract breaks. People feel threatened, not because you are wrong, but because your transformation forces them to confront their own stagnation. Some will try to pull you back with guilt, with ridicule, with concern that masks control. Are you sure you're okay? You've changed. This isn't you. They are right. And that is the problem. The true self is not designed to maintain harmony with dysfunction. It disrupts. It refuses to play along. This is why individuation often feels lonely. You are leaving the collective unconscious, the shared sleep, and those still sleeping do not welcome the awakened. Jung saw this clearly. He believed society depends on people remaining partially unconscious, predictable, manageable, conforming. The individuated person is unpredictable. They act from an inner law, and systems do not trust what they cannot control. This is where fear intensifies, not fear of failure, fear of isolation, fear of being misunderstood, fear of standing without approval. These fears are primal, because once exile meant death. The psyche remembers this, so it warns you. This is dangerous, and it is right. Not physically, existentially. You are risking belonging. For authenticity, you are risking certainty. For truth, you are risking identity. For reality. But Jung insisted, this risk is unavoidable, because the alternative is a life of quiet despair, a life where the soul slowly suffocates, where bitterness replaces vitality, where blame replaces responsibility, where unconsciousness becomes cruelty. He believed most human evil comes not from intention, but from unexamined lives, from people who never met themselves. So the psyche pushes harder. Dreams become vivid. Symbols intensify. Synchronicities appear. Not mystical signs. Psychological signals. The unconscious trying to speak in the only language it has. Images. Feelings. Disruptions. This is where many people panic. They think something is wrong with them. They seek to return to who they were. But Jung would say, nothing is wrong. Something is ending. And endings feel like danger because they remove what was familiar. But what is familiar is not always what is true. Finding your true self means letting parts of you die, beliefs, identities, attachments. This is grief, real grief, and it cannot be bypassed. If you rush it, you fragment. If you suppress it, it returns as symptoms. If you face it, something solid forms underneath. Not happiness, not certainty, but coherence. You begin to feel that your life is internally aligned, that your actions match your values, that your choices are yours. This coherence is what gives courage, not confidence. Courage comes from knowing you are no longer betraying yourself. And once that begins, the danger changes. It is no longer the danger of collapse. It becomes the danger of refusing to go back. Because once you taste inner truth, living a lie feels unbearable. That is the real point of no return. And the psyche knows it, which is why this journey is delayed, resisted, feared, but also inevitable. If you are listening to this, if this feels uncomfortably accurate, then the process is already underway. And the only question left is not whether it will happen, but whether you will meet it consciously. At some point on this path, you realize something unsettling. The danger is not the world. It is you, not the version you show, the version you avoid. According to Carl Jung, the greatest threat to consciousness is what the ego refuses to recognize. That refusal creates the shadow, and the shadow does not disappear because you are spiritual, intelligent, or well-intentioned. It waits, it grows, and it expresses itself when you are weakest. This is why finding your true self forces you to confront what you would rather disown. Your capacity for cruelty, for envy, for domination, for indifference, not as fantasies, as potentials. This is where many people quit. They confuse self-knowledge with self-condemnation. But Jung was clear. What you do not integrate, you will enact unconsciously. And unconsciously enacted darkness is far more dangerous than consciously acknowledged darkness. This is the paradox. The person who believes they are incapable of harm is the most likely to cause it because they never see it coming. Integration begins when you stop asking, why am I like this? And start asking, what am I capable of? That question removes innocence. And innocence is comforting. But innocence is also blindness. The true self is not innocent. It is responsible. Responsibility means you no longer blame your shadow on circumstances. You stop saying, I was triggered. You start saying, I reacted. That shift is small, but it changes everything. Because reaction belongs to the unconscious. Response belongs to the integrated self. Finding your true self means reclaiming responsibility, the ability to respond, rather than be possessed. This requires strength, not moral strength, psychological strength, the strength to sit with impulses without acting them out or repressing them, the strength to feel hatred without becoming violent, the strength to feel desire without becoming compulsive, the strength to feel fear without collapsing. This strength is not taught. It is forged in moments where no one is watching, moments where you choose, not what feels good, but what feels true. This is why Jung distrusted collective morality. Crowds outsource responsibility. They tell you what to think, who to hate, what to fear. The individuated person cannot hide in the crowd. They must decide. And decision is dangerous because you can be wrong, because you can fail, because you can be blamed. But avoiding decision is more dangerous still, because then your life is decided for you. The true self does not eliminate fear, it reorganizes it. Fear becomes a signal, not a master. You still feel it, but you are no longer owned by it. This is when your behavior changes. You stop over-explaining. You stop people-pleasing. You stop seeking permission, not because you are arrogant, but because you are anchored. Anchored people do not need constant validation. They do not borrow identity from trends or ideologies. They are not easily manipulated by outrage or panic. They have met their inner chaos. So external chaos does not hijack them. This is why finding your true self is dangerous to systems. Integrated individuals are difficult to control. They do not respond predictably. They do not confuse authority with truth. They can cooperate without surrendering conscience. They can stand alone without becoming bitter. But this independence comes at a cost. You lose the comfort of certainty. You live with tension, with ambiguity, with unanswered questions. Jung believed this tension was necessary. He called it holding the opposites, the ability to contain contradiction without rushing to resolution. You are both strong and fragile, capable of love and destruction, desiring connection and solitude. The unintegrated mind chooses one side and demonizes the other. The integrated self contains both. This containment creates depth, and depth is rare because depth requires patience, stillness, silence, the willingness to not immediately escape discomfort. This is why modern life works against individuation. Constant noise, constant stimulation, constant distraction, anything to avoid meeting yourself. Finding your true self means reducing noise, externally and internally. It means noticing where you lie to maintain peace, where you shrink to be liked, where you perform certainty to avoid vulnerability. Each lie weakens you. Each truth strengthens you. Not instantly, gradually, quietly, until one day you realize you no longer feel fake inside your own life. That is when danger transforms. It is no longer the danger of collapse. It becomes the danger of integrity, because now, when you act against yourself, you feel it immediately. There is no buffer, no numbness, no self-deception. This makes life sharper, but also cleaner. You stop wasting energy on self-betrayal, and that energy returns as clarity, as presence, as a grounded sense of I am here, not as a concept, as a felt reality. This is the true self, emerging, not as an identity, as an orientation. And once this orientation stabilizes, the final question appears. Not who am I, but how do I live this without losing myself? By the time you reach this point, you understand something most people never do. Finding your true self is not about self-expression. It is about self-obligation. According to Carl Jung, once the inner truth reveals itself, you are no longer free to ignore it. Awareness creates duty. This is why the journey feels dangerous, because it removes plausible deniability. You can no longer say, I didn't know. You know. And knowing demands alignment. The true self does not ask to be admired. It demands to be lived quietly, consistently, without applause. This is where fantasy collapses. No dramatic breakthroughs, no permanent clarity, just daily choices that either respect or betray the self you have met. And betrayal is now costly. It doesn't just feel wrong, it feels destabilizing. Because when you live against your inner law, the psyche responds immediately, with tension, with fatigue, with inner conflict. These are not punishments, they are corrections. Jung believed the psyche is self-regulating. When you listen, it guides. When you ignore, it obstructs. Living the true self means accepting limits. You cannot be everything. You cannot satisfy everyone. You cannot maintain every connection. Some paths close, so others can open. This requires renunciation, not deprivation. Renunciation is conscious refusal Deprivation is unconscious loss. The integrated person chooses. They do not drift. They know what they are willing to sacrifice and what they are not. This is where character forms, not from ideals, from consistent choices made under pressure. The true self also demands restraint, not repression. Restraint is power under control. You do not act on every impulse. You do not voice every thought. You do not indulge every desire. Because now you understand what these energies are for. Aggression becomes boundary. Desire becomes direction. Fear becomes information. This is maturity. And maturity is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not seek validation. It simply lives. But there is a final danger. Jung warned about inflation, the belief that because you see more, you are more. This is the ego, reclaiming territory. True individuation does not make you superior. It makes you responsible. You are more aware of your impact, more aware of your projections, more aware of how easily power corrupts. So you move carefully, humbly. The true self is not loud. It does not dominate rooms. It does not seek followers. It radiates coherence.l, and coherence attracts, without trying. This is why integrated people often feel strangely steady, not exciting, not dramatic, steady. They are not constantly reinventing themselves. They are refining. They are not chasing meaning. They are enacting it. Meaning emerges from responsibility lived over time. This is Jung's final message. Meaning is not found. It is earned through alignment, through sacrifice, through truth. And yes, this path is dangerous because it costs illusions, because it demands courage, because it removes escape routes. But the alternative is far more dangerous. A life where you never meet yourself, where resentment grows quietly, where bitterness replaces vitality, where unconsciousness becomes destiny. If you have listened this far, then some part of you is already committed. You don't need to rush. You don't need to announce anything. Just begin where you are. Notice where you lie to keep peace. Notice where you shrink to belong. Notice where you betray yourself to be liked. And stop, one place at a time. That is how the true self is lived, not all at once, but relentlessly. Because once you know who you are, the only real danger is pretending you don't. If this resonated, don't just listen. Engage consciously. According to Carl Jung, what remains unconscious does not disappear. It directs your life. So pause for a moment. Notice what line unsettled you, what idea you resisted, what truth felt uncomfortable. That reaction matters. If you're willing, write one honest word in the comments. That describes what this stirred in you, not for others, for yourself. Then, if you want to continue this work, subscribe and stay with this channel. Not for motivation, not for comfort, but for clarity. These videos aren't meant to be binged. They're meant to be returned to when the psyche asks deeper questions. And it will. Because the moment you start facing yourself, there is no going back to unconsciousness, only forward with awareness. Stay here.